So again, good morning, aloha. My name is Dr. Lynette Williamson. I'm very excited to present hopefully some innovative ways that you can add some flavor, some engagement perhaps to your face-to-face or online teaching practice. Again, micro lectures and Pecha Kucha, which is a Japanese presentation style that we'll talk about if you've never heard of it before. Currently, I am teaching and living in the beautiful state of Hawaii. So I'm at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And I provided you my email address. If you have further questions after the end of this presentation, feel free to contact me directly. I also provided a handout, which I hope you have gotten able to see that. And on the handout is also my email address. So this is our agenda for this afternoon for this presentation. I'm going to give you some background information after I introduce myself, and then we're going to have some time for a breakout activity. And not really sure, but we'll be flexible in terms of how we handle the breakout activity. I have two separate kind of breakout activities. One is focused on micro lectures, and the other breakout activity is focused on Pecha Kucha. And then we're going to have a report out briefly from our breakout room so we can share information, and then we will wrap things up. So as I noted at the beginning of the time here to this afternoon, and I'll probably keep saying this morning because it is morning for me, I noted that I am in the state of Hawaii. I currently live on the island of Oahu, which is noted here in the picture. If you're not familiar, Hawaii has 4 major islands, and I live on the island that is the state capital and has the largest population in terms of people, but it's also not the biggest island in terms of size, but it's the most populated island. I live on what's called the west side of the island. I'm sort of in the country, so to speak. I don't live in the city area. And the major city, again, is Honolulu, which is the capital of the state of Hawaii. I moved to Hawaii in 2019, right before the pandemic. I moved here to take on the position at University of Hawaii, West Oahu. And prior to living here, I spent most of my adult life and all of my childhood in Pennsylvania. I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is also the capital city. So I kind of have a thing for capital cities, apparently. I was born in the capital of Pennsylvania, which is Harrisburg. And then I went to school. I got one of my degrees in the western side of the state. And then I spent a large portion of my adult life living in the Philadelphia area, which is on the eastern side of the state. And so that is kind of where my roots are, so to speak. But I am definitely establishing my roots here, hopefully in Hawaii. A little bit more information about my educational background. You can see my degrees on the screen. My teaching concentration is health information management. I also have some experience in working in the business sector in terms of business, non-healthcare oriented, but healthcare is also a business to some degree, especially in the United States. And then my focus for my doctoral degree was in higher education, and my dissertation work and a lot of my research is focused on engagement, specifically for online teaching platforms. I have been teaching for 22 years. And prior to teaching, I was working actively in health information management. And once I transitioned, I started teaching part-time in a non-credit environment, helping students who wanted to transition from working in a nursing-oriented way to working in health information. And I kind of fell in love with it and I have been teaching ever since. I have taught face-to-face, I've taught in an asynchronous environment, and during the pandemic, I had the opportunity to teach in a synchronous environment, specifically using Zoom. So again, we're going to talk today a little bit about micro lectures and Pecha Kucha. Sometimes I say Pecha Kucha, sometimes Pecha Kucha. So excuse my pronunciation. I'm not an expert in Japanese language, but both of these styles are somewhat integrated in a sense because they both are ways to maybe abbreviate your lecture component and hopefully engage and focus your students' attention. So first, we're going to talk about a micro lecture. In general, a micro lecture is a short video. Typically, it's something that is produced by the instructor. And in this video, the instructor is going over a single concept or perhaps something else that needs to be highlighted. And I'll give you some examples in a little bit about what I have used micro lectures for. From a historical standpoint, micro lectures are attributed to David Penrose, who, if you have heard of him, he's also known as the 1-minute professor. He talks about doing 1-minute lectures. And so it's kind of a 2.0 version, I like to call it, of the 1-minute lecture, meaning it's longer than 1 minute. And you could potentially use micro lectures in obviously the traditional online type classes, asynchronous, but you also could use it in a flipped classroom or synchronous, where you're actually meeting with your students, but you're having them view information online. The key to a micro lecture is it must be short, typically 10 minutes or less, so that really focuses your attention as the creator. And I think it's also important, and it's supported by some of the information out there, that during the micro lecture, the students can actually see you. So it shouldn't be that they're just looking at a PowerPoint. And you could certainly do something like this where they can see both the PowerPoint and you. But you want to at least make sure they have that identification of who's speaking to them. Some additional concepts: you want to be perhaps creative on how you name the video, the lecture that you're putting in the course, because you want to engage them by the title. You also perhaps want to think about where you're putting the video. I personally like to embed my videos, which means I don't put a hyperlink. I actually embed them in the learning management system. And how to do that will depend on which learning management system you're actually using. But you want to think about strategically where you're going to place them, because you want to, again, grab their attention. So you don't want to put it way down at the end if you're a scrolling type or you have a lot of content. You want to perhaps put it very top of the screen, if possible. You also perhaps want to have a transcript for yourself. If this is something you've never done before, and again, you have to only have 10 minutes, so you might want to make sure you have a clear identification of what you're going to talk about. Timing yourself is important, and also remember your accessibility standards for your institution. One great thing I like to do with pretty much all of my videos that I create, and I do micro lectures and I also do longer video lectures, is I upload them to YouTube, because YouTube has an auto captioning feature that you can go in and edit and make sure it's correct in terms of spelling. But it's a great way to provide an additional accessibility element if you have a student who wants to read the captioning. And a lot of times we have many students who want that. English is not their first language, and they want to be able to see the words on the screen in addition, and they can turn it on and off in YouTube. It's important that you think about maybe making the videos interactive, How do you do that? During the video itself, you can ask a question and have your students respond to that question in a discussion forum area or in some other way. If you want them to write it up and submit it as a Word document or more of a narrative, you could do that. It's great if you have them post their answers to an online discussion board, because then they can have that, what I call a digital conversation between each other. Choose whichever method works best for you and for your particular content. If you do the interactivity component, that's really good because you can then have some level of assurance that the students actually watched the video. You can also ask them a very thought-provoking question, and if the answer is not quite on target, then you know that perhaps you need to revisit that concept. And you certainly can revisit it in a variety of ways, such as providing a Word document or perhaps having a synchronous meeting with some of the students who are perhaps not understanding whatever the concept is that you talked about in your micro lecture. So micro lectures and Pecha Kucha are very related. This is a very perhaps prescriptive style, I would say, in the sense that if you do it the traditional way, it's 20 slides and they auto advance in a 20-second time frame. So it does have that kind of parameters. It comes again from the Japanese industry of architecture. It was a way to target presentations to clients and vendors. And I have used it, and I've also adapted it. So you can sort of adapt it in a sense. I've had a few slides here in this presentation that are mostly imageries, and they don't have any or very limited amount of words on them. But obviously they're not auto advancing. I'm advancing the slides in this presentation. So I've done it in that way where I've used more than 20 slides, but it does have an appeal to the visual learner, which is very advantageous. And also, again, it can be very colorful, which is a great thing. And it allows, personally, as an instructor and an educator, it does allow for you to be a little bit more creative. And that can be advantageous depending on the content that you are teaching. It is a way to increase communication. I also like to use this particular style with very clear parameters as a part of a student submission. So you can turn it around and have your students actually use this presentation style for a class assessment, whatever that may be. And it also could be used, obviously, in a asynchronous environment, or again, a hybrid type environment, or what we call now perhaps high flex, if you've heard of high flex, where you have students perhaps in the classroom with you, but you also may have students online, all at the same class session. If you have a student population that perhaps is not comfortable with technology, and I have had that where I've had older, more non-traditional students who didn't feel like they were experts in PowerPoint. They didn't know about the auto advance feature. One of the things I have done is I've partnered them up with another student. So there's 2 students working on the presentation. It does move rather quickly. So again, you might, depending on your student population, you might give them more time. You might tell them they have, 45 seconds per slide. There is a tool called Adobe, used to be called Adobe Spark. And it does have an auto feature. It will automatically, once they create the presentation, it will automatically only gives them a certain amount of time on each slide. But you can obviously also just use PowerPoint. The students can use PowerPoint, or you could use PowerPoint also. I think both of these particular presentation styles are very helpful in our current educational environment. Given the reality of many of our students, social media, the ability to get information really quickly. We have to deal with attention span. And so it's helpful to be able to use some of these tools. It will most likely help with your retention, and students will feel more involved and empowered with your educational programs. And so that brings into the sustainability component and the recruitment component, because we're all looking to find ways to keep and attract students to our online programs. Students have a lot of choices now in terms of education and of course online education. And so these are tools that can be an extra level versus them just reading the screen in an online course. Couple examples here for Pecha Kucha. I have used it as a way to target my syllabus overview. So I've used it as one of the very first video presentations in the first lesson of a online course. You could also, again, if you create it and put it in a place such as YouTube, you could send the link to it in an email. So students have accessibility to the syllabus overview before the classes begin, which is one of my practices. I typically send out an email at least a week before classes begin, and I include the syllabus and the link to the syllabus overview in that video. You can use a Pecha Kucha if you want to do your welcome, which could be very short, doesn't have to be a long lecture. And you could also give them information about the field. If you're in a particular discipline and you are teaching maybe an entry-level class and you want to provide some background information on your particular discipline. In health information management, we have a lot of what we call professional certifications, and students often know about them a little bit and they don't understand some of the nuances. So I use this particular style to provide them information on the different certifications, specifically for health information management. For micro lectures, again, you're focusing on a concept. Many years ago, when I really first started diving into video presentations in the online classes, and at that time, we didn't have a lot of the technology that we have today to be able to create these videos. But one of the pieces of advice I had received from an instructional designer was to focus in on the concepts that are more complex, or focus in on the concepts that you know based on having taught the class before that previous students struggled with. And so I've used this micro lecture style specifically for those particular concepts. Some examples of it would be answering a question like, what is this particular concept, or why is this important? Why do your students need to know about, in my case, something called social determinants of health? Why do they need to understand what social determinants of health is and how that impacts them as potentially a future health information management professional? Or, what are the major US health system, US reimbursement system, health insurance carriers, and how are they different? And again, it really forces you to target and be concise. And it can be a challenge, which is going to lean us into our breakout activities. So I have two breakout activities kind of grouped. One is focused on micro lectures, and the other one is focused on Pecha Kucha. And so I'm going to give you hopefully an opportunity to take a breath, which is always helpful, and think about either or. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do two breakout rooms or how we're going to organize them, but the first breakout activity is looking at micro lectures. And so one of the things you want to think about is what kind of topic would you potentially use? I gave you some examples, but in your particular discipline, are there specific topics that you're like, oh yes, I need to talk about this for 10 minutes? And then perhaps think about the video tool that you would use, the one that you're the most comfortable with. There's a lot of options out there. You can also use your personal cell phone. There's a way you can make an iMovie, and depending on your learning management system, you could download it into your phone, from your phone to your LMS. What is your primary goal? What concern or challenges do you see for yourself? Again, in creating micro lectures, and again, these are reflection questions. And then our second activity, if we're able to do that, is to have you actually create a Pecha Kucha. 3 slides, you need at least 3 images, 1 image per slide. There's no words potentially. You could maybe put 1 or 2, but technically, if you're doing a straight Pecha Kucha, there's no words, just a picture. And then how would you use this particular style? Do you think it could be used in your particular discipline for a student submission, such as an oral presentation, or maybe they could use it as a reflection piece, or they could use it as a summary piece of a written research paper? And what benefits could your student population experience from using this style? So those are our 2 breakout activities.